Hey everybody, I hope you're having a great week. Today we're going to be speaking about our next category in music history. So we've talked about, we talked about Baroque, and then last week we talked about classical, and then this week we're going to talk about a period called Romantic. Now, before you go, ugh, gross, kissing, yuck. Romantic in this sense does not necessarily mean it's lovey-dovey music at all. It's just this time in history that we call the Romantic period. The Romantic period, up here if you can see, I don't know, it lasted from 1825 until about 1900. So, that time in music, things were changing, right? We had a lot more instruments added to the orchestra. On my chart back here, I know you can't necessarily see it, but one thing that's really noticeable is that this orange or red part, kind of pink in the middle, that's the woodwind section. They added a bunch of different instruments during this time. Also back in the percussion, instead of just having like a couple of different drums or timpani, they added like the gong and different types of drums, like the snare drum and cymbals, lots of different types of percussion. But the woodwinds, that's probably the most significant sound-wise. That's where we added the oboe. That's where you added things like the clarinet, all of these very warm-sounding instruments. And so this period in music history, it's a little bit different. So remember last week we talked about how in classical music, you started having this very specific form, the way that things were written, while the harmonies worked together to have one melody or melodic idea, and we could kind of hum along to what was happening. Those pieces were usually really long, and they were in this format, right? So you had like one movement, and then the next movement, and da-da-da-da-da, and everything kind of had a different feel by section. Where as we get into the Romantic period, it kind of gets away from that idea. It's a freer form. So a lot of times the music written in this period is a little bit more focused, maybe. So when you hear something, you immediately can tell, oh, this is a serious piece, or this is a light piece, or this is a fun piece, or this might be a scary piece. And you can kind of feel the storytelling in the music itself. This is also the time in history, and we'll talk about it in a second, where orchestration, so like this type of music, starts meshing better together with theater and acting. So before this time, you had everything kind of separated. You had ballet, and that was one thing, and then you had like orchestra and concerts and that kind of music. Music was separate. And then you had acting and stage and theater, and all of those things, while they might have elements of each other, there was one clear-cut focus, right? So in this period, that kind of starts to change, and people start writing pieces to go into plays. It's not what we think of as a musical today, but it's closer in that area. Music is written to give the feel of the story being told. Also, songs are now, in the Romantic period, more written to words. So like, they might write with a certain idea. They might create the story of the song around certain words rather than the music being written and adding words later, okay? So our highlight today is going to be Edvard Grieg. Now, you've probably not heard his name before. Now, Edvard, it has a V rather than a W like Edward in English. It's spelled that way because he grew up in Norway. That's where he was born. His family, they were musicians. His mom was a really good pianist. She could play piano, and she was his first music teacher, which is really kind of cool. A lot of times women were not considered teachers yet in that time. I know, crazy, right? But he had the music teacher of his mother, and she encouraged him and taught him everything she knew about music, and then later sent him to a conservatory, a focused school where he learned a lot in Germany, one of the best schools for music in Europe. And when he graduated, he got married and he started traveling the country as a really good pianist, but along with playing piano, he started writing music. And a lot of his compositions we still hear today. He's kind of known as Norway, that like place where he was born. He's known as Norway's kind of gift to arts, right? So he has some songs that you'll recognize. We're going to listen to one today. It's called Hall of the Mountain King, which is kind of like a funny name. But when you hear it, I want you to see what images spark in your mind, what it feels like. Does it feel like a really happy piece and excited? Does it feel scary or sneaky? And just try and kind of think through what the story being told through the music is, because I guarantee you're going to have some probably strong reactions just to the vibe, the feeling that it gives. And so he was known for kind of connecting a lot of those arts in Norway. So he wrote music for obviously orchestras, but he also wrote music to be sung, and he wrote music actually for plays. So playwrights would come to him and have him write pieces that went with the stories that they were telling, which is kind of cool. And if you remember Tchaikovsky, we've talked about that name a couple of times. It's the guy that wrote the music for the Nutcracker Ballet. He actually met and knew Edvard Grieg, this guy that we're talking about today. He was a fan. He thought he was a really good musician. And I think it's kind of interesting. We think of this as being so long ago, but our composer today, Edvard Grieg, he didn't die until September of 1907, which was almost into like World War I. So that's really not that far back in history. I don't think any of your grandparents or mine were necessarily born at that time, but that's really close to like your great-grandparents would have probably lived then. And I don't think I showed you a picture, but this is Mr. Grieg, Edvard Grieg. So yeah, that's who I wanted you to talk about today and think about. And the piece you're going to listen to, I want you to listen to the Seattle Symphony. They're going to perform the Hall of the Mountain King, which is the piece that he wrote. And I want you to listen and watch, especially those woodwinds and the string instruments and the way that they kind of tell the story. It's a shorter piece. And then I want to show you how people use this type of music and the feeling that it gives to create modern works. So the second thing I want you to watch is it's the same tune. So it's the tune for Hall of the Mountain King, and it's been used a lot of different ways by people who write words and kind of create parodies to go with the music that's written. And so Disney actually did, it was like Mickey Mouse's Three Musketeers a while back. I was maybe in like high school when it came out. I don't remember. But the song that you're going to listen to, it makes me smile because it's this same piece, but they gave it to one of their characters. And you're immediately going to be tell if he's a good guy or a bad guy. You're going to be able to tell just by the feel of the story in the song. And it's just fun. It's just kind of silly. So enjoy that. And last but not least, you'll also have the House of Sound video for today, which will be focused on woodwinds. Awesome. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.